Those of you who follow me on Twitter would be extremely familiar with the Dom curse. And if you're a Warriors fan, I have to take the beginning of this video to apologize because I got dressed really quickly last night to leave the house. I put on blue shorts, so I needed a snapback to match that, and I was looking for my Magic snapback, couldn't find it, and I just subconsciously threw the Golden State one on. I swear, I threw it on without really paying attention to the fact that I was wearing a Warriors hat to a finals game. And the moment I realized what I had done, I tweeted out, "It's unavoidable that the Warriors are going down 3-1 tonight. The Dom curse is that powerful these days," and here we are. Somehow, we are looking at the potential death of the Golden State Warrior dynasty at the hands of the Toronto Raptors. People who love to make jokes. I have a friend who loved to make jokes about Kyle Lowry, and he is going to have to deal with a Kyle Lowry championship ring. I cannot wait to experience an NBA Twitter that has to deal with that fact. These are just, these are exciting times. So anyways, let's talk. I can't remember when I heard Steve Kerr say it, but I've always agreed with it, and he talked about how winning a championship, to win an NBA championship, you gotta have everything go right. You gotta have the talent, you gotta have all that, but you also have to be a little bit lucky. And that quote right there is why I don't put asterisks on championships. If you watch the last Barbershop talk, we discussed that a lot. We discussed like the Warriors rings, and after that video, I had actually found a picture that was asking from CBS Sports, I believe, if this Raptors title was going to have an asterisk on it because of all the injuries that happened to the Warriors. And I never talked about where I stood on it. I was just talking about where people generally stand. And for me, I don't put asterisks on titles for that reason, because technically you could go back through any season and you could find some reason to put an asterisk on a team's title, and I mean that for like most seasons in history really. Just think about this before you try to discredit a team's title and say they were lucky or this team was injured. Just think about this. To win an NBA championship, you've got to get through 82 regular season games. You've got to get through those games hoping that your star player doesn't get hurt, hoping that a very important role player doesn't get hurt, because people underrate how impactful a role player can be. So it can be a guy that's not the star of a team, but he goes down with a devastating knee injury that could change the team's whole season because he was filling a very important role to that team's success. You have to hope nobody twists an ankle right before the playoffs so you don't get a bad first round matchup and all of a sudden that matchup goes longer than it should have. There's so many moving parts, right? Then you have to win 16 playoff games, and most teams do not just win 16 straight or even get close to that. So for a very long time, to win a championship under any circumstance, any team needs a little luck on their side. Gotta hope nobody lands on one of your players' legs or that they don't land wrong. There's just so many moving parts with that. And so on the topic of championships, that's why I always looked at 2015 with the Warriors and said, hey, they beat who was in front of them to win that title. They couldn't do anything about Kyrie and Love not being there. They couldn't magically make them reappear. They did what they were supposed to. They won that championship. Where I start to change a little bit is I just say that not all titles are equal. To me, you could have the take that, oh, a champion is a champion, and of course in the history books it's always going to be that way, and okay, I get you there. But to me, clearly some titles just mean more than others. Dirk Nowitzki's title in 2011 is more valuable to me than any of Kevin Durant's rings, and it looks like it might only be 2 now. Even if he got a 3rd this year, Dirk Nowitzki's ring is more important than all of those. LeBron's 2016 ring, that is a crazy valuable ring. You could go through and have like tiers of NBA championships. I think that would be a fun thing to do. You could put them in tiers the same way that you can put Hall of Famers in tiers. All Hall of Famers aren't equal, all championships aren't equal, but you're still a champion. And that's respectable one way or another because you had to fight pretty much all your life to get to that point, no matter what roles you played in it. So with all that being said, here we are potentially watching the death of a dynasty, and I've seen the death of, I would say, 3, okay, how do I phrase this? I haven't seen 3 straight up dynasties, but I've seen teams that were on the verge of dynasties or that look like they were a dynasty or whatever. Here's what I have in mind. I have the Los Angeles Lakers with Kobe and Gasol. That was not a dynasty, but they did make the finals 3 straight years. They repeated. And then in 2011, they got brutally destroyed by the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs. The Miami Heat were on the verge of a dynasty. They had made 4 straight titles, or 4 straight championship series, and they were looking for their 3rd title in 4 years in 2014, which would have made them a dynasty. And Golden State, in my opinion, already is a dynasty. They have 3 rings in 4 years. This would have been their 4th championship in 5 years, so they were already a dynasty either way, but now they were looking for that 3-peat that you really that you really want. And I'll tell you this, watching Golden State right now, the reason somebody DM'd me and asked me, was I surprised at the result of the game last night? The only thing I was surprised about was seeing a team like the Raptors and how they did not play well at all in the first half, but they weren't getting blown out. That was the surprising part, but the result of this, no. The result hasn't been surprising because watching Golden State this series has felt exactly the same as watching LA when you knew it was over for them in 2011. After they had made the finals 3 straight times and they were trying to three-peat that year, and watching them in that second round, the vibe and everything, it felt similar to this. Watching the Miami Heat is more comparable, I would say. Watching the Heat in 2014 against the Spurs, this is almost exactly what it felt like. You guys remember the Miami Heat, they were tied going back to Miami just like Golden State was tied going back to Golden State. And they lost both home games to the Spurs, and that's when you knew it was pretty much over. And so that's the exact same format we have here. Toronto won game 1 like the Spurs in 2014, then they lost game 2, then they took both of the opponents' home games. And so at this point, this is not just like, this wouldn't be just like a 3-1 comeback like the Cavaliers, right? Because the Cavaliers were down 2-0 first, and then they went down 3-1. They didn't lose both their home games. To watch the team, especially what seems to be the better team in Golden State, or what people thought was the better team, lose both their home games, that's another level. And they look wounded, obviously. In Game 3, they did not have Klay Thompson, Kevon Looney, or Kevin Durant. And watching Game 4 last night, I saw Klay Thompson limping back into the locker room after the game was over. He was limping. He's clearly... I've gained respect for him and Kevon Looney because they're clearly playing through some pain right now. And some real pain, not just the generalization, oh, everyone's hurt right now. No, these are real like strains and stuff they're playing through and fractures. I especially have respect for Kevon Looney playing through that fracture because you could see he was in pain the whole night. Like, even on that first lob from Draymond Green that he usually dunks, he had to lay it up. His free throws, they were short. I respect him for trying to play, but clearly he is in some major pain. DeMarcus Cousins isn't any of the help that people expected when he first signed with Golden State, and of course I think that has more to do with the injury that happened during the playoffs. I think if he had played this entire playoff season, he would be a little bit more help right now, but clearly his conditioning is not at an NBA Finals level. He's not able to hustle to loose balls the way that I think he would have if he had been here all year, or even, most of the year. My point with all this is Golden State is a wounded and dying dynasty, and they look just like the Miami Heat in 2014. Although the Heat were not yet a dynasty, they were trying to go forward in 2014, as I said, and that was the year Dwayne Wade was clearly, he just no longer had it. The team no longer had it. And that right there, again, so that goes back to the asterisk conversation. So do you put an asterisk on the Spurs 2014 title because they couldn't beat the Miami Heat in 2013 when people were healthy, but in 2014 when Dwayne Wade had steeply declined, then they won? Do you put an asterisk on that title? No, we talk about the Spurs as one of the best teams ever. And so with this series, of course, there is the dynamic of Kevin Durant. I told you, I don't know if I put this in the last Barbershop talk, but I pretty much gave up on seeing him play again this series once I saw him wobbling around in the hallway of Game 3. The Warriors have kept everyone on their toes by constantly saying Kevin Durant is probably going to come back this game. First it was midway through the series and that hasn't happened. The latest I've heard, I believe from Steve Kerr, is that it would be Game 5 or 6, and now that's a Game 6 if it's necessary. And maybe he will come back, maybe he will. I never know what happens with these teams or their decision making. But there's two things here. First off, if I was Kevin Durant, I don't know how eager I would be to come back or to rush myself back, especially if I was not ready. You ask yourself most of the times what could be more important in the championship round, and that's why Kevon Looney is out there playing with a fracture. That's why Klay Thompson is out there playing on a bum hamstring. That's why Iguodala has been playing through the Achilles issue that I know he probably still has. I don't think that magically went away. It's because this is the final round and you're going to play, through whatever you have to play through. The fact that KD has been out probably means that it's something he cannot play through. And if he's not 100%, you guys got to remember, Kevin Durant has a bag waiting on him this summer somewhere. He said himself he wants money. So from KD's perspective, if you already know that nobody respects these titles that you're winning in Golden State, and you're not 100%, I don't see from him why it would make sense to come back to the series. Why does it make sense to come back on an injury that's in your leg, by the way, because that's always the worst kind. You can make it worse, it could develop into a tear, and now you look wild this summer because you got to pitch to a team in free agency that you're still Kevin Durant, even though you have a scary injury, if he were to come back and make it worse. So I don't think it makes sense from that perspective. And the second thing is, if he were to come back, would he have like Kevin Durant impact? The immediate impact he would have would be more like X's and O's, which was the same one that Klay Thompson had last night. Well, Klay was scoring, by the way, don't get me wrong, but immediately you saw that they actually had to put more defensive attention on him in the post. They had to double him more, and of course that opens up other people's games. That just makes the game easier. It was much more competitive than game 3. So KD would have that impact on the floor at least, because that's another guy you have to stretch the defense for, that you have to pay attention to, and that his presence period would make it more difficult on the Raptors. But with that being said, the Raptors are a very good team. If KD is not going to come back and have superstar KD impact, it's going to be really hard for the Warriors to win. It's going to be hard for them to come back 3-1 either way in a series, especially when they don't have home court advantage. You got to take 2 in Toronto now, which they're a championship DNA team. They can, of course, I don't know if the road really scares them or not, but that's a tall order for anybody. So I'll take a stance. For me, I don't expect Kevin Durant to come back and save the day. I would be thoroughly impressed if he came back and did so, because I don't care what you think about a stacked team or this, that, or the other thing. Coming back mid-final series off an injury that has kept him out now a month, I believe, and to come back 3-1 on a team like Toronto, that would be impressive no matter how you try to spin it. But again, I don't see that happening. Steve Kerr once said that he doesn't believe they would have won 8 straight whether Michael Jordan retired or not, because just doing this every single year, people don't see what goes on with teams behind the scenes. This gets tiring. This is now their 5th straight run. I think some of what he was talking about in a potential Bulls 8-peat is playing out right now in Golden State. I think this is the end of the road. And if it's not, then paint me impressed. So I might talk about 2 more things to wrap this up. One, I saw a tweet last night that was very interesting. It was an angle I hadn't thought about. Kawhi Leonard was traded in a risky move by the Raptors, or traded to the Raptors in a very risky move by them last summer. I made a video with that title and it got taken down because of an ad in it or whatever. But anyways, it was risky because we knew that Kawhi, A, was coming off of some type of mystery injury. We didn't know how serious it was. And B, because of the scary R word when you think about trading for stars, rental. And that's the interesting part of this, because how do teams change their perspectives about rental now that they've seen the Raptors potentially are going to win an NBA championship? They were a team that has always been close, but they flat out weren't good enough. So they made a couple tweaks. They traded in coaches, and then they traded in stars. And they didn't have to do that, right? DeMar DeRozan still had a couple of years on his contract, I believe. And they said, you know what? No, we're going to trade him for a rental. And if the rental doesn't work out, we don't go to the finals, we don't get a championship, then we're just going to have to rebuild. That is rolling the dice. They rolled the dice. And so, right now what it looks like it worked. So now what do teams think about an Anthony Davis he has 1 year left on his contract? What does a team who could possibly put together a contender this summer, even though they're not really on Anthony Davis's list, what do they think about that now? Going into the future, what do teams think about stars on 1 year contracts? And instead of just saying, oh, we're contending right now and we don't want to have to restart if he leaves us, how does that change the thinking to, wait, what if we trade for this guy and we go all the way like the Raptors did? We still don't know what happens with that, because as far as I know, it's still not a guarantee that Kawhi is going to stay if they do win the championship. But personally, I don't see how you leave a team you won the championship with. I just don't, but maybe he has other things on his mind. I don't know. Anyways, that's an interesting conversation. I wish I remembered who tweeted it, but that is a very interesting conversation. Kawhi could have potentially really changed the thinking in the league about rentals, because what the Raptors did, in a couple days here we might be saying it worked. And I will end this video with saying that if this is the end of the Golden Dynasty, it is not going to be looked at favorably by history. It's really not. This is not a great way to go out. This is not a good look, because do you know what this looks like? This looks like the Warriors won a title in 2015 that people don't respect. Then they won 2 more titles after losing to the Cavaliers and adding Kevin Durant, which made them overkill. And then they lost the last one that they didn't have Kevin Durant for all of or most of the series. That's not a good look. I can already see the narratives and the conversations about Kevin Durant. What can you do without KD? This, that, and the other. This is not a good look. Especially coming into the series, a lot of people were still giving it, which I never understood, by the way. You go back and check my record. I was like, I don't know why y'all are talking about the Warriors in 5 or 4. Like, even without Kevin Durant, people were like, oh cool, Warriors in 4. And I was just sitting back thinking, did y'all watch the Raptors this season? Maybe they're a little bit sketch at times, but they are not a sweep without Kevin Durant. But anyways, people still thought the Warriors could win the series without KD. They thought that they were capable. And yeah, so far, they're not going to pull it off. And I think the response to saying that Golden State had injuries is going to be saying, well, the Raptors had injuries too. OG didn't play. Kawhi has been hurt now since what, like the Sixers series? He's been limping for a bit, but we don't even know what that injury was. He just straight up, he muscled through it. And yeah, I'll end this by saying there's two things that I've maintained throughout these years because my channels have been around for all of the Golden Dynasty now. I'd always said that nobody really had a chance against them unless they were severely injured or there were multiple injuries, and that's exactly what's happened here. But there's one thing I also said about dynasties, because I did live through the Heat, who were almost very close to being a dynasty. I lived through the Lakers trying to be a dynasty. And I lived through my own Celtics, who put together the Big Three and people immediately crowned them like 3-time champions. And in one of my Dom 2K videos on that channel, I used to say, these things, these super teams, they never work out the way we think they're going to work out. Initially, when these teams put together a ridiculous amount of talent, like the Heat did with the Big Three, like the Celtics did, like the Warriors did, we always say, damn, they're never going to lose the finals again. They're going to go on and win X amount of championships. And I said, it's always something that derails it over time, whether it's attitudes, whether it's injuries, it's always something, and it always ends up falling short. It fell short with the Heat, it fell short with the Celtics, and by all indications, it's going to fall short with Golden State. That's unless Kevin Durant miraculously comes back from this mysterious calf/Achilles injury and saves them, and if that happens, then I just have no faith left in humanity. Anyways, that is all for today's video. Stick around today, stick around because I am about to aggressively shake things up. I have another video coming out on this channel later, and then I have one coming out on Dom 2K. So yeah, just stick around my social media or whatever, cause definitely got some interesting things coming from the summer. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, comment, and sub, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.